Hi everyone, welcome back to Crimes Across Borders. My name is Cora, and today's story honestly sounds like it could have been written for a movie. And in a way it was. At the center of it is Krystian Bala, a man whose obsession with control, jealousy, and ego led him to murder. And then he bragged about it in his own novel. Let me know if you already heard about this case, because it actually made headlines around the world during and after the trial. It's one of the rare cases, at least in Poland, where the investigation was based only on circumstantial evidence. This is a story about arrogance, obsession, and a man who truly believed he could outsmart everyone, including the police. So let's get into it. There's not a lot publicly known about Dariusz Janiszewski, and honestly, I think that's important to point out. He wasn't a celebrity, he wasn't involved in anything shady, he was just a regular guy living his life. He was born in 1965 and lived in Wrocław, Poland. He was actually a really talented guitarist. He was known in the local music scene for playing in bands called Dallas and Panama. And music was a huge part in his life for a long time. But after finishing his law degree, Dariusz shifted gears. He opened his own advertising company and focused more on building his business and letting his musical career take a bit of a backseat, as probably a lot of adults can relate to this. From everything we know, Dariusz was hardworking, creative, smart, someone building a steady future. He had a circle of friends, he had a wife, and he had plans. There was nothing in his life that would suggest he was heading towards anything dangerous. It's the year 2000, November 13. This day started like any other day at work. At some point, a call came into Dariusz's office, and his mother, who worked there as his secretary, answered it. There was a man on the other end, and he said he had a big advertising project to discuss, but he refused to talk to anyone except Dariusz. After a bit of back and forth, she gave him Dariusz's direct number. And later on, Dariusz got the same call and agreed to meet the man in person. It was supposed to be at the site where a large billboard was supposed to go up. His job would have been to create an ad for it. He left the office for what should have been just a regular meeting. But strangely, he didn't take his own car, the one he usually used for everything. Security at the building where he had his office said that they seen him leaving the building around 4 p.m. with two men closely behind him. It was never confirmed if those two men were with him, following him, or just walking near him, and that was the last time anyone saw him. His wife reported him missing almost immediately. At first, the police didn't take it very seriously, as you can imagine. They told her he was an adult, maybe he just went out drinking and would eventually come back. Some even suggested that since he was a good-looking man, maybe he had run off with someone else. But his wife didn't back down. She insisted something was wrong. And eventually the police agreed to take the report and open a missing person investigation. Despite the fact that the police technically took the report and started the investigation, there wasn't a lot of things being done by the police. It was mainly the friends or family that were checking the hospitals, looking for him around the city in the known places, the places they knew he could go. And of course, they haven't found him. And then on December 10th, so just a few months after, fishermen on the Oder River made a horrifying discovery. About 80 kilometers from Wrocław, they found the body of a man floating in the water, and it was quickly confirmed to be Dariusz. From the very beginning, it was obvious this wasn't some tragic accident. And just a heads up, the next part gets a little graphic. When the police recovered the body, they found Dariusz only in his underwear, hands tied behind his back and a noose around his neck. It was tied in a way that any movement would tighten it even more. There were clear signs he had been beaten and starved for several days. His stomach was completely empty, suggesting he hadn't eaten for at least 3 days, and it was a detail that would later become very important to investigators. His cause of death was at first determined as strangulation, and later it was officially changed to drowning. It was brutal, it was deliberate, and it was clear that whoever did this had gone out of their way to make Dariusz suffer. But despite the obvious signs of foul play, the investigation quickly hit a wall. Dariusz didn't seem to have any enemies, no major financial problems, no dangerous business rivals. And with no real leads, no witnesses, and very little forensic evidence, the case went cold. Then fast forward almost 3 years, and here's where the story takes a turn that nobody could have predicted. In 2003, the file landed on the desk of a police investigator who had a real passion for cold cases. Jacek Wróblewski, or as his colleagues would sometimes call him, Jack Sparrow, because he literally directly translates to Jack Sparrow, his name. He would often spend his evenings going through old files at his desk, studying them night after night, feeling like he was missing something. Until finally, one night, something clicked. Dariusz had a mobile phone that was never recovered. Wróblewski contacted Dariusz's widow, Agata, who luckily had the bills and even the EMI number for that phone. Using that information, they managed to track it down. It turned out that the phone had been sold online on a Polish website called Allegro, which is basically a Polish version of eBay. The original seller was using the nickname Chris B, and a month before the disappearance of Dariusz, the same Chris B tried to buy a book, a police manual called Accidental, Suicidal, or Criminal Hanging. Not sus at all. Investigators traced the account back to a man named Krystian Bala. And the deeper they dug, the more interesting Bala became. He had once been a very promising philosophy student, someone professors believed would go far academically. But to everyone's surprise, while still studying, he married his high school sweetheart. They had a son in 1997, and after graduation, instead of continuing into this path that everyone envisioned for him, he decided to open his own company. Actually, he opened 2 companies. One of them was specializing in cleaning shopping malls, shopping centers. At first, the business was going very well, but eventually it went bankrupt. And around the same time, his marriage also started to fall apart. Despite being extremely jealous and controlling over his wife, Krystian wasn't exactly faithful himself. By the year 2000, their marriage officially ended in divorce. Very shortly after this, Krystian was already living with a new woman, and eventually the same year, he ended up moving out of Poland and started traveling around the world. He spent time in the United States, traveled across South America, and eventually made his way through Asia as well. He would do odd jobs, teaching English and scuba diving. To investigators, Krystian Bala was definitely someone they needed to speak to. He was from the same city as Dariusz, and even more suspicious, Dariusz's phone has been listed for sale just 4 days after his disappearance. And police knew that Dariusz was held somewhere for about 3 days. Police kept digging, and that's when they found that Bala had published a book, a novel called Amok. When Detective Wróblewski got his hands on a copy and started reading it, immediately it raised alarm bells. The book was dark, brutal, and quite pornographic. And while it was written in a very metaphorical, layered style, there were details that were eerily similar to the real-life murder of Dariusz Janiszewski. At first, you might think, okay, maybe it's just coincidence. Crime novels can be very dark. But the closer police looked, the harder it became to dismiss. In Amok, the main character, Chris, starts cheating on his wife and goes on some kind of a sex binge with multiple women. Eventually, he murders his wife with a Japanese knife, and he strangulates her with a rope as well, and later sells that knife online. There was many unsettling parallels in the book, and the more they read, the more sinister it got. The investigators couldn't ignore the similarities. They kept studying Amok carefully, reading and rereading it, looking for hidden clues, but they knew that it wasn't enough to arrest Krystian Bala. So they continued gathering information. They learned that Krystian had a reputation for being arrogant, jealous, and almost narcissistic, especially towards his ex-wife. It turned out that Krystian's ex-wife had met Dariusz at a party. They hit it off right away, but after meeting again, she realized he was actually married and decided to end it, or more like not even start anything. And later she told investigators that Krystian had been asking their common friend about Dariusz, as well as sending her vulgar emails about the men she was dating. Another incident that stood out to the police was on a New Year's Eve. Apparently Krystian, after drinking with a group of friends and co-workers in a club, got extremely aggressive, and he tried to attack a man who was supposedly seeing his ex-wife, and he had to be dragged out by the staff and other guests. While being kicked out, he apparently shouted that he had already taken care of one of her boyfriends with a rope. At that time, everyone just kind of dismissed it as drunken nonsense. But now, with everything adding up, it just didn't seem so harmless anymore. In the meantime, the case of Dariusz's disappearance was featured in a Polish documentary news program called 997, which I guess is similar to America's Most Wanted. This program worked closely with the police and was about getting public to help solve cold cases. It was discovered that the 997 website, as well as the Wrocław police website, had been regularly accessed from several locations in South America and Asia. What made this odd was that the case was relatively local to Poland, not widely known at the time, and true crime wasn't this global phenomenon it is now. The investigators took a closer look, matching the dates and locations of these website accesses with the movements of Krystian Bala while he was abroad. And sure enough, the timelines lined up perfectly. This suggested that Bala had been keeping an eye on the case, which raised even more questions about his involvement. The only problem, Bala was still abroad at the time. The police had to be incredibly cautious. They were working slowly and carefully to avoid alarming Krystian Bala. If they pushed too hard, he might slip away. They weren't even sure if he was the killer, but they knew he had to be involved in some way. There was also the possibility of accomplices, and they had to trade lightly with them as well. But eventually they got lucky, and Krystian came back to Poland. Detective Wróblewski said in an interview that as the investigation heated up, Bala started visiting his lovers, trying to convince them not to testify. But instead of silencing them, he did the opposite. His attempts to control the witnesses only reminded them of the details they may have otherwise forgotten. It was just straightening the case against him. I guess it just shows how arrogant and full of himself he was. I mean, if selling the victim's phone online wasn't already a proof to that. During the interrogations, Bala couldn't stop talking. Instead of staying quiet like any half-smart person would, he kept giving contradictory statements, acting incredibly smug, basically toying with the police. He was making weird philosophical arguments about morality and violence. He technically even confessed, but eventually he realized that things were getting quite serious, or maybe he just got tired of playing, and he refused to sign the papers, retracting all his previous statements. And honestly, it seemed like Bala treated the entire investigation like a game. He even agreed to take a polygraph test. It was quite interesting. The results were inconclusive, but the investigators weren't convinced at all. While he was hooked up to the machine, they noticed he was using controlled breathing techniques to try and cheat the test. I did mention earlier he was teaching scuba diving. Apparently he was an experienced diver, so he knew exactly how to regulate his body under stress, control his breathing, basically anything that would help him pass the test. In 2007, Krystian Bala was officially charged with the murder of Dariusz Janiszewski. It was a huge case in Poland, basically the first major trial in a long time where almost all of the evidence was purely circumstantial. The prosecution built their case around a combination of circumstantial and behavioral evidence. There were multiple forensic psychiatrists who were talking about Krystian's personality, describing him as having above average intelligence, but severe personality issues. They said he forms shallow, short-lived relationships and doesn't consider the feelings of others. He reacts violently to criticism and has tendency towards emotional manipulation. His self-esteem is extremely high, often seeing himself as exceptional, yet he is unstable and sometimes even expressing feelings of worthlessness. The prosecution didn't have a confession or any clear physical evidence like DNA tying him to the scene, but they were sure they had enough. There were 14 pieces of circumstantial evidence, and 10 of them were strong enough to form a logical chain that convinced the court to convict him. Among these evidence, there was his obsessive behavior online, incredibly incriminating interviews, the magnetic card used in the payphone to call Dariusz's cell phone and his company line on the day he disappeared, as well as calls made to numbers connected to Krystian, like his family, and of course the cell phone that was sold online. There was also a pen with the logo of Dariusz's advertising company found in Krystian's flat, and of course the opinions of the psychiatrists. Interestingly, the book Amok wasn't officially used as evidence. The prosecution knew it would be too easy for the defense to get it thrown out. That decision came as a big surprise, not just to the media and the public, but also to Krystian himself, since his whole defense strategy was focused on discrediting the book as evidence. Bala, true to form, acted like he was the smartest man in the room, or in the courtroom, treating the entire trial like some kind of intellectual performance. He insulted the investigators and the judging panel, and he talked about his book so much that the judge had to reprimand him multiple times to stop. And ultimately, the jury wasn't impressed. Krystian Bala was convicted of murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. His case, with its strange mix of arrogance, crime, and mystery, even caught the attention of filmmakers and inspired a couple of movies. Perhaps you guys seen at least one of them. It's a Hollywood production. It was called True Crimes, and then it was changed to Dark Crimes, starring Jim Carrey as the lead detective. There was also a Polish production called Amok. I haven't watched either of them, so I can't say how closely they stick to the real story, but from what I gathered, the Polish one is actually pretty accurate, which I find a bit amusing because Bala himself sold the rights to his image, even though they portrayed him as a brutal, sadistic killer. Meanwhile, in real life, he's still insisting he's completely innocent. He blames the judges, the investigators, accusing them of fabricating evidence and working together to frame him. And he doesn't hold back. In every opportunity he's had, through written and video interviews, he openly insults them. As you can imagine, he appealed twice, maybe even 3 times, but it didn't get him anywhere. He's currently due to finish his sentence in January 2031, but that might not be the end of his legal troubles. He also has a separate ruling against him, ordering him to pay damages to Dariusz's family to cover the cost of the court proceedings. And because he was hiding the money he got from the movie based on his story, he might actually get some years for that too. And they will be served after his initial sentence is finished. This case still blows my mind. Krystian Bala's arrogance and the need to control the narrative, it's honestly chilling. There are people around us like this. He thought he was smarter than everyone else, that he can write this a perfect crime and get away with it. But there are still questions in my mind that haven't really been answered. Where was exactly Dariusz killed, and who were those 2 men that were near him when he was leaving the office? Were they working with Krystian? The police mentioned this multiple times, that they strongly believe Krystian Bala didn't commit this crime by himself. Dariusz was fit, largely bald, strong man. They say they would be extremely difficult for Krystian to just overpower Dariusz by himself, and they strongly believe he had some help. But of course, nothing ever came out of it. It wasn't even mentioned too much in the trial. But Krystian never mentioned, he didn't try to put the blame on anyone else. He never mentioned anyone else, so we don't know. I mean, there are many ways how one man can overpower another another fit man. So it is possible for sure. But it is quite interesting that police to this day believes that he was not working alone. But they kind of settled with the fact that at least they got Krystian. Or maybe, just maybe, Krystian didn't actually kill Dariusz. I have to admit, I was considering his innocence at the start of my research, but after watching his interviews and reading the psychiatrist's statements during the trial, I just don't see it anymore. There's something about Krystian's need to be seen, even if it meant exposing himself. You can feel it when you look at him, listen to his words. That level of ego, it ultimately destroyed him. So what do you think? Was it pure ego that got him? Do you believe he acted alone? Or is there something else we are still missing? I mean, for sure we are missing something. It's just what? What do we miss? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts on this complicated and messy case. And if you found this story interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.